Well, the 10th anniversary of 9/11 is upon us. 10 years, hard to believe. But time has a habit of putting some distance between us and the trauma of even the most horrendous of life's moments. And in this case, the worst terrorist attack in the history of our country is an event never to be forgotten. And at the 10-year mark, it seems most appropriate to stop and reflect back on where we've been and with a bit of hope to where we are headed as a nation. Good evening and welcome to Politics Tonight. I'm WGN-TV political analyst Paul Lisnick. This is our nightly look at politics around our city, state, and nation. Tonight, my guests are Joe Dittmar. He is a survivor of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. He was there. And Tim O'Brien is a Chicago firefighter who went to New York City to aid in the search after the attacks. And Tom Makaitis, WGN's TV's terrorism expert and a professor of history at DePaul. All will join me this evening. My guest will be with me in just a moment. Let me introduce my guest to you. Joining me here in the newsroom, a familiar face to viewers on WGN and CLTV, Tom Makaitis, a professor of history at DePaul University and also our WGN terrorism analyst. Tom, thanks for coming back this evening.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Joining us at Trib Tower is Tim O'Brien. He's a Chicago firefighter. He went to New York City to help his brethren to save lives. We're going to get his story tonight. Sir, thank you for your service and thanks for being with me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us by Skype is Joe Dittmar. Now, Joe used to live in this area. He's off in North Carolina now, where he's moved. Joe was on the 105th floor of Tower 2, but I'm not going to tell you his story. I'm going to have him tell you his story. Joe, perhaps more than anybody, I'm so glad you are with us this evening. And welcome back to Politics Tonight. I'm WGN-TV political analyst Paul Lisnick with a special look at the events of 9/11. It is the 10th anniversary. We're looking back at those horrendous moments, but we're going to look forward as well. Let me reintroduce my guests. Here in the newsroom, Professor Tom Makaitis, professor of history at DePaul University. He's also, of course, WGN-TV's terrorism analyst. Tom, we're going to get to you in just a second.
Okay, sure.
And joining us by Skype from North Carolina, where he lives now, Joe Dittmar. We heard his incredible story of how he got down safely from the 105th floor of Tower 2 in the midst of all that was going on. Joe, again, so glad you're here. And let's go to Trib Tower. Let me talk to fireman Tim O'Brien. Mr. Firefighter, first of all, I've said it before and I'll say it again, thank you for your service, sir. When this event happened, you were here in Chicago. You could have just said, well, it's New York, it's not Chicago. Hope they're okay. It's not what you did.
No, Paul, that's not what I did, or many, many, many other firefighters from all across the country and Canada. You know, the day we watched it unfold, we all sat there and kind of, as a firefighter, kind of armchair quarterback the events and watching it. And we had, you know, very grave expectations when we knew that it was an airliner that hit it. And we kind of figured that something bad was going to go wrong, and it did. It went a lot worse than anybody expected. We all congregated, got in our cars, and headed out there to help.
And exactly, you drove out. There were no planes going there, so you had to drive.
Yes,
and by the way, am I right? I know you had permission to go, but my understanding is there were a lot of firefighters who actually asked for permission to go. It was denied. Can you shed some light on why the reaction around the country was, no, everybody's got to get there? Why there was some resistance, or was it about, you know, there could be concerns here, I suppose?
That's exactly what it was, Paul. Don't read too much into that. If you're the mayor of the city of Chicago and you're the fire commissioner and the CEOs here, you have to be concerned about your city too. And in the beginning, people started to leave, firefighters from Chicago, firefighters from all the suburbs, and everybody wanted to help their brother. They wanted to help their Americans. They wanted to do their part. And it got to a point where the city had some concerns about if things were to go wrong here, they would have nobody here for a large-scale attack. Mm-hmm. So after a while, the city had to shut down permission to leave.
Tim, by the way, I went to 9/11 a few weeks after it happened, or a couple of weeks after it happened, and even then, smoke in the air, I had to wear a mask. I mean, weeks later, and breathing was difficult. You were there much sooner after the event than me. Describe for our viewers what you saw when you got there. Do the pictures do it any justice from what we've seen?
No, not at all. The only thing I've said, and I'll say it again, it was what I imagined it would have been like. Remember as a child looking at pictures of war-torn Europe, black and white photos in your history books? Yeah. It was like inserting yourself into a photo like that. The entire lower Manhattan was gray. It was void of all color. Everything was covered with concrete ash. So nothing, you couldn't tell one building from another. Everything had the exact same appearance to it. The devastation was just ungodly. And no matter where you looked, it was such a massive pile. The devastation was so large, you just couldn't believe it. It took you an hour to walk around it if you wanted to walk around the entire thing. But we didn't do that. We walked in, we stood there, we stared for a moment. We asked our brothers where we could help, and they put us right to work.
Wow. Hey, Joe, let me come back to you, because when you got out of the building, you were there, of course, instantly. And in other words, Tim had to make his way down. You were there when it happened. What did you see when you left the building?
Just the unbelievable, the twisted steel, crumbled concrete on the ground, and red blotches. And you knew what the red blotches were. And it was just not as much as what you saw at that particular moment, it's what you heard. The sound, unmistakable sound of bodies hitting the ground was almost like a gunshot. And it was so loud and so devastating.
Tom, Professor Makaitis, let me come to you, I guess, with a simple question. I know, by the way, on that day, when you heard what was going on, you didn't even believe it. It took a young voice in your family to encourage you to realize what was happening, huh?
Yeah, despite being a terrorism expert, of course, my children all knew what I do. And my 12-year-old son, our youngest, I was taking him to school. We heard it on the radio, and he said, "Oh, Dad, it's a terrorist attack." I said, "Oh, no." It was so unbelievable. I said, somebody, poor guy, ran his Piper Cub into the building, and it'll be no big deal. As soon as I got home, I realized he was right. I was wrong, and it was a pretty nonstop day from there.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about, again, the aftermath, but we're going to look forward as well. I mean, it's important to remember, but it's important to look forward. How safe are we? What needs to be done to keep us even safer than we are? And further reflections from those who lived through it. We welcome your phone calls as well at 877-358-2588. You are watching Politics Tonight, only on CLTV. Stay with us. Welcome back to Politics Tonight. I'm Paul Lisnick. We're taking a look at the 10th anniversary of 9/11 this evening with people who know much better than me what this was all about on that day. Why? Because two of my guests were there. Let me reintroduce them to you again. First of all, here in the newsroom, our terrorism expert, Tom Makaitis, professor of history at DePaul, shedding an academic light on all of this. Joining us over at the Trib Tower, firefighter Tim O'Brien. He went to do his part shortly after this happened to help his brethren and people in need. And Joe Dittmar, he was on the 105th floor of Tower 2 when this happened. He got out safely. Joe, question for all of you. I'm going to start with you. Of course, one of the key events going on in New York this 10th anniversary is the opening or unveiling, if you will, of the 9/11 memorial. Only family members are being allowed to go there first. Only the survivors, you, for example, I'm sure would be invited to be there as somebody who got out. You're not going to this, and you have a principled reason for not doing so. Joe, what is that?
Absolutely. The people that saved our lives aren't invited. People like your brave firefighter friend there that are visiting with you tonight, Tim, are not invited to this. And that is just totally inappropriate as far as I'm concerned. These are the guys and women that saved lives and that went in and put their lives on the line, and some gave all. And it just is not right that they're not invited for the sake of seats for politicians and people who feel like they need to be there. This isn't a political event.
Tim O'Brien, let me come to you. You are a firefighter, so I guess if what Joe says is true, you weren't invited to be there. Are you offended by that? Does it matter to you? What's your thought about the memorial and how important it is?
I'm not offended that I wasn't invited. I am offended that the New York firefighters weren't invited, you know, and that really is a shame, because as Joe said, you know, you have to understand, when these men knew a jetliner hit that building, they know from their training that jet fuel burns at 2,000 degrees and steel melts at 900 degrees. You don't need to be a nuclear engineer or physicist to understand that the building was coming down. Those men knew that day that it was their last day, it was their last job, and they still did their job anyways. And it really is a shame for New York City to stiff them like that.
Tim, just a quick follow-up with you. Firefighter safety, safer today as a result of 9/11, new procedures?
Yes, firefighter safety is much safer today. There's been a tremendous amount of cross-training with Homeland Security, police, fire, different agencies. We're never the safest. I'm not guaranteeing anybody that there won't be an attack, but if something were to happen, we have worked diligently over the last 10 years to make sure that we are more prepared to try to mitigate an incident.
And you know, Tim, almost like a mantra from that event, and I think most people know, as everybody said, when those planes hit and everybody ran from the buildings, the firefighters ran in. It's amazing. Tom Makaitis, professor of history, WGN terrorism analyst. Two things. Number one, how important is this memorial? Is it, I mean, as a memory, as a commemoration, is it something we should put behind us? What role does it serve?
It plays an enormous role. Before I was a terrorism expert, I was and still am a historian. And this sort of collective memory that we will never forget is both important as a cathartic thing and as an honoring of all of those people. And I totally agree that the responders should have been included. But also, it's something, a way for the nation to kind of embrace what occurred. And I think it will be something that will be part of our heritage for a very long time.
All right, we're going to take our final break. When we come back, I'm going to ask my guests what we've learned from all of this. It's a look ahead. Are we safer? And what have we learned? Stay with us. You're watching Politics Tonight. It's a look back at 9/11, only on CLTV. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Politics Tonight. I'm Paul Lisnick. We're taking a special look at 9/11 with folks who have been there and somebody who understands terrorism very well. Let me go to Tom Makaitis, professor of history at DePaul and our WGN-TV terrorism analyst. Tom, the simple question is, are we safer today? But when I ask that question, you know, when I go through the airport and I see people taking their shoes off and whatever, and I have a friend who always says, you know what, they've already won. Look at everything we're going through. Are we safer, Tom?
I think we are safer. Unfortunately, Americans want no inconvenience, 100% security, and complete independence, and those things are not compatible. But the fact is, we're more on guard. What you experience, I keep saying this to people, is a small percentage of the screening process. Much of it is you're being observed and watched and checked. But it is all, it's layered, it's good, it's collective, it's not perfect. We continue to work on it.
Joe Dittmar, you were on the 105th floor of the Tower 2. You got out, so probably nobody thanks God more than you in terms of being safe and making the decisions you did that day, especially since the colleagues you were with perished that day. But since then, Joe, looking forward, a lot of stereotyping goes on. People are afraid of, let's be honest about it, people are afraid of Muslims. They see the, you know, the certain dress and all of that, and it scares people. My question for you, stereotyping, a bad thing as we look forward, and there's even an attempt to build a mosque and recreation center, Muslim-run, not all that far from ground zero. It's become a big political issue. What's your thought as somebody who survived all of this?
First of all, the putting the mosque up, you know, they have the God-given right to build what they want to build where they want to build it. That's what our country's all about. Second of all, it wasn't the Muslim religion that attacked us. We know who attacked us. We know who he was and what he did and what his goals were. He was a, you know, dastardly terrorist. He happened to be Muslim. He did it in the name of religion. But the God that I love and the God that those people love wouldn't ever have allowed that to happen that day. So I don't hold this against anybody. We know who did it.
It sounds like it's our very American values that would propel us to just permit that kind of thing. We're not getting into that political discussion. Tim O'Brien, you're a firefighter. You went to New York. When other people ran away, you ran to the problem. This weekend, I talked to some firefighters in Frankfurt, where there also a piece of the World Trade Center arrived there, a permanent memorial. I met people who lost their spouses, husbands, whatever, not at 9/11, but other fires and things. What is there about the connection between firefighters that propels you to do what you do?
You know what? It's the greatest fraternity placed on this earth. I'm blessed to be a firefighter, and I can't explain it, but let me tell you, a lot of people think that when they're in trouble, they need to go to a police station, and that is ideal. But don't forget, you can always walk into any firehouse. Firefighters are just born helpers. We were born and bred to help people. We were born, just like the police officers in the military, to put our life on the line for you. So it's something fraternal. It's just an instinct. We needed to be there. We all felt we needed to do our part for America. And the guys were sitting back home. Believe me, they were no less courageous. They were just stuck here because they were on duty and didn't get the opportunity to go.
Joe Dittmar, if you have a message to young people who are watching, students need to study this in the future. Briefly, what's your message to young people?
Absolutely. They need to always remember and never forget this day, understand what it was all about, and understand that, you know, we can't make the same mistakes again, and we need to learn by what we've had happen to us in history.
Tim O'Brien, firefighter, brief message for young people.
Support your police and fire departments.
Tom Makaitis, what would you say to young people briefly?
I'd repeat Joe's comment, don't stereotype entire groups for the evil actions of a few.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And again, what a warm feeling it is to see you here today. That Joe, that you survived. Thank you for being with us. It's fabulous. Tim, I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. Tom Makaitis for shedding light on everything. Thank you, sir, as well.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks to all of you.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you all for joining us tonight as well for this special edition as we look back at 9/11. Tomorrow night, President Obama delivers his jobs address to Congress. We'll be here watching and talking about it. I'm Paul Lisnick. This is Politics Tonight. Good night.